Hi, I'm Femi OK and you're in the stream. Today, how far would you go to help those around you? Our guest is a former First Lady who was so determined to take care of the women and children of her country, she gave up everything she had to fund that dream. I have a feeling that the story of our guest today will inspire you. Edna Adan Ismail is a former First Lady of Somalia and the founder of the Edna Adan University Hospital in Somaliland. She joins us in the studio. Edna, it's great to have you.
It's good to be here, Femi.
Now, how's the hospital doing? You're not there, you're here. What happens when you're gone?
Well, they're trained to look after it even after I'm gone.
Okay.
And this is what I tell them. If I'm here, if I'm gone, if I'm dead, if I'm elsewhere, the hospital continues to run.
Very good. So in our conversation today, Malika Bilal, our digital producer, is absolutely critical. I was impressed by our online community about how much they knew about Edna. The questions were spot on.
They definitely are very interesting questions that I'm hoping to bring up during the conversation, and a lot of them are focused on how inspiring our guest is here today. But of course, for those of you who are tweeting us, we will see your tweets, but we've also got a number of guests interested in speaking with Edna in our Google Plus Hangout. They'll be posing their questions in just a moment, and you can be in a future Hangout as well. Just make sure you're in our Google Plus circle by going to the link below.
Hi, I'm Selena Said. I'm in the boondocks of Canada, and I'm in the street.
Edna Adan Ismail was raised in Somaliland. That's a region that broke away from Somalia in 1991 and is still waiting for international recognition. Edna says that she was the first Somali girl to be awarded an academic scholarship in the UK. She studied nursing, midwifery and hospital management for 7 years and then headed back to Somalia to become the first certified nurse midwife in the country. Throughout her professional life, Edna always wanted to build a maternity hospital in Somaliland where 1 in 9 children die before their 5th birthday. The Edna Adan University Hospital opened in the city of Jazeera in 2002, and so far around about 14,000 babies have been delivered and hundreds of nurses and midwives trained. So Edna, when you walk around the hospital that is your hospital, how does that feel?
Oh, it feels good.
Yeah.
It feels good. It took me a whole lifetime to set it up.
Yes.
I've been wanting to do it since I was a young girl. And of course, in your life, there are careers, there are things that get in the way. You don't have the means, you don't have the time. You've got family commitments. But then when I retired, I had the time and the means that I had worked for all my life to realize my lifelong dream. It feels good. Of course, there are many things that need improvement. And but then with friends like the Fistula Foundation, and I see Kate in the Hangout and other very, very supportive friends, they help me to keep it running and to continue the training of health workers, because building a hospital is just the beginning. Mm-hmm. It's not the entire thing. It's people who run hospitals. It's the skills and what people bring into it. The nurses, the midwives, the doctors, even the community around us. That's what helps a hospital to stay alive and to run and to function and provide the care that it was built for.
I have a
so
shot.
It feels good.
I'm glad, because if I'd built that, I would be just crying every day looking at everything that kind of came together. On my laptop, I have a picture of you in a TEDx talk, and you keep saying in this talk, well, in your country, women don't die from this, and in your country, this isn't an issue.
Absolutely.
You were bringing up some very specific issues that affect women and kids in Somaliland. Will you help us understand what they are?
Yes. Well, of course, in a country like the United States, where we happen to be today, and other developed countries, women go through pregnancies, they go to have a child, they're followed by professionals. Any little problem that arises or deviation from the normal, any are sorted out, and there are professionals there to make sure that the outcome of that pregnancy is a healthy one for both the mother and the child. But then in a country like mine, and there are many countries in the world that go through the same, have the same difficulties, women go through a pregnancy one after the other without having a health professional monitor the pregnancy, the development of the baby, the condition of the mother, and when the time comes for that woman to have a baby, very often there's no equipment, there's no trained midwife, there's no hospital facility. In the event of a complication, she bleeds, she dies. She develops eclampsia. She goes into fits and dies. The baby cannot come out. There's nobody there to do a cesarean section and help her get that baby out while it is still alive. So it's situations like that kill.
Right.
That should not kill anybody. It should not kill women in this day and age. And this is what I try to do. I try to train midwives and to have a facility that can respond to an emergency in as quick a time as possible. For instance, you have an operating theatre. It has to be functional 24 hours a day. You cannot look for equipment or look for a surgeon or look for an anaesthetist when there's a woman who is there, who's bleeding and dying. There has to be an emergency preparedness.
Sure.
And you go through the training and you say, what if a woman comes in who has this or other condition? What do we have in place to deal with that? So you've got to make sure that this is in place before the emergency happens.
Sure. I want to pick up on some of those details of some of the incidences in just a second, but I first want to focus on something you said, pulling it out, because you made it sound easier than I know that it is. You said building a hospital is just the beginning, naturally. So we got this tweet in from Dawn who says, what are the difficulties that arise during building Somaliland's first maternity hospital? What were some of those initial obstacles?
Well, the building it, you see, when somebody's building something, you can see what you've done today. You've built that wall, you put in the windows, you put in the tile on the floors, you see what you're doing, you put the roof, you see that you're getting closer to the completion of it. Running a hospital is a daily thing to dealing with the emergencies, having supplies in place, having the professionals who know how to deal with this emergency, paying your bills, paying salaries, having equipment. For instance, there are times we run out of IV cannulas. The only cannulas available in town would be those that would be for an adult. And if you have a baby that needs an intravenous cannula put in and there's none available in town, it's a big problem. So you have to anticipate supplies and have a stock and supplies available so that even if you do run out, you have some reserve and backup. Running it, things go wrong, equipment fail, water, and I will emphasize that again and again. Electricity, you touch a wall, light comes on. We touch a wall, sometimes light does not come on. We turn a tap, sometimes water does not come out. So it's all of these things that come together. You've got to feed patients. You need to have a laundry system that works. You need to have a garbage collection system.
What made you qualify to do something that sounds like you're running a city?
It's bigger than I ever thought it would be.
I can't even imagine that you had an idea of even half of that.
I didn't think I would have to face all of those when I started building the hospital.
Did you have a moment where you're like, maybe I shouldn't be doing this?
Well, there are times when I say, whatever made me do this? Now, how did I ever get myself into this? And then I say, I got into this because there's somebody who needs it.
Right.
There's a woman who's doing it, and nobody else is doing it. I wish there would be somebody who could do this, and I say, thank goodness, so-and-so's taking care of that.
Sure.
But if you are where the buck stops, as you say in your language, then you have to deal with it. You either stay away from it in the beginning and say, no, I will not go into this. Or once you commit yourself to it, you have to do whatever as best as you can. And
Edna, we have more questions to squeeze in, so I'm going to get you to take a pause. Malika, go with some more questions.
Well, you're talking about the intricacies of your city-like hospital, and so I want to go to someone in our hangout who you mentioned, Kate, and she knows better than most because she had a chance to visit it. Kate, go ahead.
I love what Edna just described about the day-to-day challenges of running that hospital, having spent a week there a little over a year ago and actually living in the hospital with Edna and seeing the 24/7 operation that goes on there. I mean, I live in Silicon Valley. People talk about 24/7 here, but 24/7 in Hargeisa, in that hospital, is patients that are literally showing up, every hour of the day. Women in labor, obviously labor is a time-sensitive event. And so it wasn't just building that hospital, it's keeping it running 12 months out of the year. Edna, you're an old soul, but in some ways you've got a young body. You work tirelessly on behalf of these women. And I guess what I would love to get you talking about just for a minute is, you talked about starting in midwifery as a young woman, but what motivated you to even go into midwifery at that point in your life? You're a young woman. What was it that you saw growing up? What was it that influenced you? Because here you are in the sort of golden years of your life, but what you were doing in the 1950s is influencing what you're doing now. And I'd love to just have you go back to that, probably to inspire younger women, as Muna and Meskrem said at the beginning.
Yeah, well, I think my decision to build a hospital goes beyond beyond my training. It was really my father who inspired me, and that was a man who was trying to do things in the very difficult circumstances. He was somebody who was known as the father of healthcare, still known as Aden Doctor. When I really need things done in Somaliland, I don't say I'm Edna Aden Ismail, I'm saying I'm the daughter of Aden Ismail. And that does open a few doors. He was someone who had a heart had weighed a ton, and a man who was full of compassion, a very generous person, who loved his job, loved people, and who was loved by all. And as a girl on holidays from school, I would hang around him, around the hospital, and I would be his helper, and he would get me to do little errands for him, and I admired the way he was dealing with these problems, and how he approached people, and the respect with which he took care of the people who came to seek his help. And I thought, one day I will have the kind of hospital my father would have liked to work in, because often I would hear him say, "Oh, I wish I had better instruments. Oh, I wish I had more bandages. Oh, I wish I had," I would hear his loud wishes. And I would say, well, maybe one day I'll have a hospital that has these in place. And he was the person who inspired me. My training as a nurse, my passion at that time was surgery. I was going to work in an OR all my life. But then one thing that my father said was, surgery is good, but what are you going to do for women when they're having a baby? And I thought, all my life, he had given me so many opportunities. He had opened so many doors to me. And this was an indirect suggestion of me having to do midwifery.
Right.
So I said, well, I'll go into this, but just so that I know how a baby comes out and what to do for a woman who's having a baby, never thinking that this was going to be with me for the rest of my life. Sure. And after the first baby was born, and this is the Hammersmith Hospital in London, the postgraduate.
I know that hospital.
Yes, it's a great hospital.
Yeah.
You can blame them for everything I've become. And after the first baby, I delivered the first baby. This was my lifelong passion. And I'm glad that my father sowed that little seed in my brain, because I would have missed out so much. I would have been locked up in an OR, swimming through instruments and surgery and scalpels and what have you, and forceps, and missing this human relationship with women that midwifery brings to healthcare. Because you're with woman at a time when she is most afraid, and at a time when she is most vulnerable, and she places herself in your hands and the life of her baby in your hands, and you have to do the best that you can for both mother and baby and family.
And do you mind if I show a picture from your gallery of your website, the hospital website? There's a picture of a little baby, a little boy, and it was the first baby of, you talked about your first baby ever. It's the first baby of your hospital ever.
This is a little Harry.
What a cutie.
Yes, he is. And he's a nice young man now. And he wants to study medicine.
Oh, really?
Yes.
So he's a little older here, but how old is he now?
He's what, 13 years old?
Wow.
And we invite him.
You're inspiring a whole new generation going on here.
Why not? He's a good kid, good brain.
There's some really important things that we want to talk about, and it's hard for us to talk about them on the stream, but today it's easier. The two things. One is fistula, which I think is pretty critical.
Oh,
Malik, I know you've got some questions.
And the other, of course, is female genital mutilation. Some call it cutting, others circumcision. Lots of tweets. Shusha writes in what actions are being taken to stop it. Another person wants to know the best way to educate women. But there's also a comment in our Hangout. I'd like to go to Meskrem for more. Go ahead.
Hi, so my question was, as a woman who has been trying to combat a harmful but traditional practice of FGM. What type of challenges did you face from the women that you were trying to help, from society in general, or from family members or people that were closely tied to you?
Well, of course, it's a very touchy subject, and it's a taboo subject, and people don't talk about it as they do now. Today, anybody who does not talk about FGM is a nobody. But in the early 70s, when I first started speaking out against it in public, it was as if I had uttered a bad word, and people would come up to me and say, "But Edna, you're forgetting who you are. You're talking about something that no self-respecting woman should be speaking about." But now that the problem is out in the open, the sad thing is, even though we speak about it, we do research about it, we find out figures about where it's done, how it's done, who it's done by, little girls are still being cut. How to go about it? I think we have been concentrating on educating women. We need to educate the family. We need to involve men. We need to involve the fathers of those little girls. And the strategy that I use now is I talk to fathers and I say, well, this girl is carrying your name. She is your daughter. And she is being subjected to something which is interfering with her, which is endangering her health, which is interfering with her future reproduction. And you should have a say in this. And one of the other things that I speak about and I speak to governments about is to take a strong stand against female genital mutilation or female circumcision or female cutting, whatever you call it.
Do you have
it's still
a preference
harmful
for what it's called? Because it becomes quite a political phrase now, doesn't it?
Well, I call it female genital mutilation because it is mutilating a healthy body. And it's not only cutting, but it's also the sewing that goes into it. So cutting is not enough. Circumcision probably gives somebody the idea that it might be similar to male circumcision, which of course does not involve an organ being cut away. So mutilation is as good a description of it as one can get in my limited vocabulary. And I think we should involve governments in countries like yours, where people emigrate to, where there's a big number of people coming from countries, in addition to mine, where the practice is. And they should say, once you've come to this country, no more cutting, no more mutilating, no more damaging the lives and the health of girls. So the strategy is multifaceted. It's like an army. You use airplanes, tanks, whatever works, use it. Convince people, but fight it and never give up the fight, because it needs to be fought. It's something that should not happen. And fight it the way other Muslim countries have. You go to Saudi Arabia, girls are not mutilated. So it is not a requirement by our religion, Islam. Our religion, Islam, does not require it. If it were, other Muslim women would be mutilated. They're not in Iran, they're not in Afghanistan, they're not in the Arab countries. It's only in a limited number of countries where this is taking place. And the time for FGM to end is now. If we don't speak about it, who will?
What I love about the passion is the passion comes backed with experience. Do you mind sharing your experience with us?
Well, I'm a woman from Somaliland, so of course I have been subjected to it. But then, as a well-brought-up girl, I wouldn't speak about it. I wouldn't talk about it in public until about 1976, 77. And the reason that I did is I went to Sudan to attend a conference on obstetrics and gynecology, where there were both men and women and religious leaders, and the problem of female circumcision was debated among the participants in that conference. And I thought, oh my God, they can talk about it. So it is possible to talk about it. So one can oppose it. And I owe a lot to the obstetricians and the gynecologists in the Sudanese people from my continent, believing in my faith, who were speaking about it as a medical problem, as a cultural problem, and something that should be done away with. That was where I got the inspiration from. And then, of course, I go to work. I'm a midwife. The problem involves the part of the body that I am dealing with when a baby is coming out of. So it's not like a finger or a thumb. It's something that affects the female reproductive life.
Sure.
So I felt it as personally, I feel it professionally, and I feel it socially because I see the people around me who are suffering from it. Sure. And if I have been given a voice, and if I have been given an opportunity to become educated, then I owe it to the world to speak out against it. Because if I did not, then I would be failing in my responsibility to my community.
You mentioned the word inspiration, and you've also been an inspiration for so many people who are tweeting into us, as well as people in our Hangout. And so I want to go to the last person in our Hangout, Mona. Go ahead.
Hi. So Edna, I'm interested in the conversation. You mentioned that you'd been starting like a dialogue around these issues, and often when we discuss women's bodies, and especially Muslim women's bodies, we can fall into statistics and sensationalized tropes that may or may not be racialized when we talk about oppression along gender lines. And so when we talk about the violence and the trauma inflicted upon, Muslim women's bodies, women of color's bodies, in your experience, is there a way to effectively have these kinds of conversations without being subject to stereotypes or deploying, tired assumptions or being, vulnerable to those kinds of discourses?
Well, Mona, that's a very good question. But then I'm a health worker. Dealing with health problems is something that I'm trained to do and something I feel very passionate about. There are so many things that go around female genital circumcision. There's social, there's gender, there's violence, there's children. There's all these things that go into it. It's a very complex problem. Others are more qualified to deal with some of those issues than I am. So I focus on the health issue. Every person, man or woman, understands bleeding. Every person understands infection. Every person understands difficulty in childbirth. Everybody understands problem with childbirth or failure to conceive because of it. So these are the issues that are bad enough to deal with, and maybe others can deal with all the other social things around it. But it's such a complex thing that one should, it's like a battle. I think that in a battle you try to silence the biggest weapon of your opponent. And I think health is a big problem with women. And our women are dying of so many other causes. They don't need to be subjected to more risks by causing this, the risks or the damages that FGM brings upon them. So deal with it the best way you can. Choose your weapons, choose your arguments.
I will say, of course, we've talked about a lot of the problems, complex problems as you called them, but I want to play this video comment from someone who might end us on a slightly uplifting note. Have a listen.
Hello from Cambridge, UK. My name is Sarah Winfield, and over the past year I've come to know and been hugely inspired by the tremendous achievements of Edna Adan Ismail and her team in Somaliland. My question is, I'm not a medic myself, but is there any way that I can contribute to the incredible work of the hospital and other associated initiatives in Hargeisa?
Yes, of course, Sarah. And education is the biggest gift that one can give to women and girls in my continent. So Britain gave me an education, and you're from Britain, and I think helping us train more women and young men as well would be the biggest gift. And even, finding us teachers who can help us teach English as a language so they have a foundation upon which they can build on a professional career. So thank you for your wanting to help.
And the best way to do that, have a look at my laptop. You can actually go to the Edna Adan University Hospital website. So it's www.ednahospital.org, and there's a little bit here that says volunteer, and it tells you exactly how you can volunteer, how much time you will need, at least 2 weeks, and you can go meet Edna, hang out in the community room, eat dinner with her, and find out how you can help the people of Somaliland and Edna's remarkable hospital. We are going to put a pause on the conversation. We're taking Edna, our guests, and your questions to the post show at stream.aljazeera.com. Let me just tell you about the next show. Does love reign supreme over race, religion, and culture? We'll discuss some of the highs and the lows of cross-cultural relationships. It is going to be a candid conversation. See you online. Thanks for watching. Yeah. Hello there. As you can tell, did you see me sort of talking off to that side? That was Edna still talking, which is good that you're still back with us at the post show. Edna Adan Ismail is the former First Lady of Somalia and the founder of the Edna Adan University Hospital in Somaliland. And we're having a conversation with her about her life, her hospital, and all of the things that she's very passionate about. And when I was looking to see maybe where you might be controversial, I know we talked about FGM. That is one area and one battle that women around the world, specifically parts, are fighting.
Yes.
But there's more controversy about you, and it really is about where you're from and how Somaliland was formed. So I'm going to show our audience, just so they're very aware of what we're talking about. So here, this area here is the Horn of Africa. This part here is known as Somalia, and then I'm going to go in a little bit closer. This part here is known as Somaliland.
Yes, former British Somaliland Protectorate. I didn't form it. It was not born in the 90s, by the way. In fact, it's the first Somali inhabited country in the Horn of Africa that ever became independent before Somalia did. And if you know, in the Horn of Africa, there is La Côte Française des Somalie, French Somaliland, which is now the Republic of Djibouti, French colony. There is La Somalia Italiana, Mogadishu, you've heard of it.
Yes.
And then there's British Somaliland Protectorate, which is where I'm from. The first independent, the firstborn, and the one that initiated union between all Somali-speaking peoples. Because there's people who speak Somali in the north of Kenya, in the 5th region of Ethiopia. There's a Somali inhabited Horn of Africa. And the vision of our politicians, in fact, our late president, Mohammed Ibrahim Egal, my first husband, was to bring all Somali people speaking together. Like when people unite, or companies unite, they unite because they wish that to be fruitful for all parties. They marry because they think, couples marry because they want to have a future together. They want to build together. Unfortunately, a union that came about after Somaliland became independent first in 1960, and then later Somalia Italiana also became independent, that union did not work so well. Like some partnerships work, some do not. And it ended up in a very long civil war between 1982 and in 1991, Somaliland ousted the communist troops of Somalia and Ziad Barre, closed its borders where the British had established it on an Anglo-Italian treaty. So the borders of Somaliland were not made by me.
See, but what's upsetting people is when you do this, and you do this whenever you talk, you say, I'm from Somaliland.
That's where I'm from.
And then people get upset, Somalis get upset, because you're making a differentiation between Somaliland and Somalia.
Absolutely.
And they feel like that it should be unified, and that's where the controversy is.
Yes, well, the controversy,
and people get upset with you about that.
We wanted Somalis to be united.
Right.
But circumstances interfered with it, and the union did not work, and was causing the death and damage to the people of Somaliland, who said, well, we went into this union because we wanted things to work, not because we wanted our people to be killed. And then Somaliland closed its borders. Somaliland is doing well. Somaliland is peaceful. Somaliland is democratic. Somaliland is where an old woman like me can build a hospital. You try doing that in Somalia. If they brought that country back to peace and democracy, there would be a platform upon which to build future dialogue upon.
Right.
But one cannot form a dialogue with people who believe in so many violent situations. Piracy, warlordism, terrorism. We do not wish to be part of that. Somaliland is doing very well without those problems. And when Somalia puts the gun down and becomes democratic, then we will sit across a table and see where we pick up our pieces from.
Malika, I feel like we just stirred the pot a bit more. Meanwhile,
I'm collating all these tweets here because, as you mentioned, people do get upset. When we tweeted this tweet out saying, what do you know about Somaliland on our stream account, it just opened up a Pandora's box of different comments.
It should not.
It should not, but I want you to...
That's the reality.
This is one of them. Jason wrote in, I was impressed by Somaliland's stability and security. When do you think its sovereignty will finally be recognized? That's one of the questions. Before you answer that, though, I just want to give you a little taste of what other people are saying. Ibrahim, on the other other hand, writes in, Edna started a hospital in Mogadishu in the mid-'80s, and after the Civil War, why doesn't she rebuild that hospital?
I don't, because the money I used to start building that hospital in Mogadishu is gone. It's been taken by the warlords. That's it.
So what happened? And how developed was that hospital?
The foundation was built. The walls around it were built. I spent about $150,000 trying to build that first hospital in Mogadishu, but because of the war situation, it failed. It did not become complete. But when I started building it in Somaliland, I was able to finish it, I was able to furnish it, and I was able to make it functional. So why would I not build it? Because I don't have the money that I had then. I can only retire once. I can only have my terminal benefits once, and that I used on the hospital in Somaliland. Maybe it's for somebody who retires like me and picks up a big fat repatriation grant from the UN or from somewhere else to build a hospital in Mogadishu. There is a need for hospitals to be built in Mogadishu, but there is also a need for Mogadishu to be peaceful and stable like Somaliland is.
I want to play one more question on the Somaliland. Look what you did, Femi.
Yes,
you
go ahead.
up something.
I know. When Edna takes a pause, we take advantage of that pause.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Exactly. So I'm going to play you this video comment from someone who left this comment.
Hi, my name is Mariam Hussein Osman, and I'm a United Nations International Youth Representative from Somalia. As the political situation continues to improve in Greater Somalia, my question for you, Edna, is from the standpoint of someone who's engaged with the political process in Somaliland, do you see potential for a reconciliation between the two regions? And a bit more specifically, given there isn't an ethnic or religious divide between Somaliland and Greater Somalia, what political elements do you perceive necessary for a formal reunification between the two?
That's a very good question. Well, first of all, let us know that the two countries are neighboring each other. And Somaliland receives a lot of refugees from Somalia. Somaliland receives a lot of patients from Somalia who need treatment. Fistula patients, for instance, come to us for treatment. Students come to Somaliland to go to school or to go to university. People trade with each other. There is no enmity. We're not enemies. We're people who come from the same ethnic background. The person who dies in Mogadishu is a Somali who is one of my people.
So,
but
what about the future for working together, though?
This is what the world has been trying to do for the past 22 years.
Why do you think why do you think it's failing?
I don't know. We want peace and stability. They do not want peace and stability. So maybe when we want the two things, when they become stable, when they become peaceful, when they become democratic, of course we will trade. Of course we will dialogue. Of course we will find solutions to see whether we reunite again or whether we become good neighbors. But then that question can be answered when Somalia becomes peaceful, democratic, stable, to the same level as Somaliland is. And for instance, fistula, I need to talk about this because this is a big problem. And one of the people, Kate and the Fistula Foundation has been so supportive of us, and plane loads of women who have a fistula problem are flown out or brought to Somaliland, whether they're being treated in my hospital or in neighboring hospital in Borama, the fistula hospital, to be treated and to have the surgical and medical treatment that they need. So there is no enmity. A sick woman is a sick woman, regardless of where she or he, patient comes from.
Let's talk a little bit more about fistula, because our time is running out, and it's rare for us to be able to do that anywhere on Al Jazeera. So let's take this opportunity
here. Should not happen to anybody.
Okay, so a childbirth injury that can happen, and it means that you're leaking feces, you're leaking urine.
Yes.
And it means in somewhere that has very little medical attention or hospitals. What's the life like for a young mother?
It's the worst thing that can happen to a woman, to be leaking urine, to be leaking feces, not to be in control of her body secretions. You and I would not be sitting here today looking so beautiful if we were not able to control our own body secretions. It's the most humiliating and then the most painful thing that can happen to a woman through no fault of hers, but because of the absence of proper obstetrical care, which has caused her to sustain this damage.
So you're doing something about it in your hospital. You even have
not me, a whole team, a whole bunch of people, like the Fistula Foundation, like the surgeons who come to operate, like the people like the Dr. Laurie Romances of this world who come, like the people who are surgeons, who are pelvic floor surgeons, who try and fix these women back to a normal situation. And one of the best things that can happen in the world is when a woman has been treated and fixed and heals and goes back to her family and becomes pregnant again, we offer her cesarean section free of charge, because we don't want her to split open again and damage one more time that pelvic floor that had been repaired.
Do you have more on fistula? I've got a little clip I'm going to play. I don't know where you're going to go.
Please play the clip.
All right. So this is from a documentary series which became incredibly famous in the US called Half the Sky.
Yes.
And it's also a movement as well, helping to empower women, recognizing great women.
Nicholas Christoph.
They came to your hospital in Somaliland
Yes.
and they watched the hospital operate.
Yes.
And there's this little moment where Edna is speaking to a patient after she's had her fistula operation.
Yes.
Just have a listen to this. I think you'll understand perfectly what Edna's talking about.
She had sustained the lacerations of fistula 2 years ago. And she heard on the radio that in the Edna hospital they were going to do repair of the fistula free of charge. And she came here and she was put on the list. She was operated. She's going home. She has to remember to have the baby by C-section. Yeah? Yeah? Okay. Good. I'm happy. She's happy. She's beautiful. I'm happy. There's a woman who's got her life back. Okay, Allah معك. That's good. They look different when they're lying down. You know, when they're standing up, and when they're lying down, they're sick, they're worried. And then when I see them, I didn't recognize her in the corridor. She stopped me and said, "Thank you. I'm going home today. I want to thank you." That's what life's all about. Thank you.
So this must happen to you so many times. And what did you just say as we were playing the video?
It always brings tears to my eyes, because some of these women come to you, they have been leaking for 10, 11, 12 years. And you say, "Well, why didn't you come and seek help before that?" And she says, "Well, I didn't think it could be fixed. I thought I was going to live and die with this condition all my life." And it's when they get operated on and it heals and they're continent and they're not leaking anymore and they cannot believe it, and they become so, how should I say, so happy that the problem was solved. They start to cry, and of course it makes you cry,
then
as
we
well.
cry, all cry.
Yes.
Head back here to my laptop, because I just want you to see this face.
Okay.
Look at this amazing face. This is what your midwives, your hospital, your volunteers are doing for the women of Somaliland.
Yes.
It's kind of impressive. Malika?
I want to, you said that's impressive, and I think that's a sentiment that I am seeing tenfold. Abdul Karim on Google Plus says, "It's our privilege to have such a person like you in Somaliland. We can't thank you enough for your dedication and your sacrifice." But this leads to a question from a couple other people. Zahra on Facebook says, "What advice would you give to others who want to follow in your footsteps?"
Well, wanting to help is already half the battle won, because the world is divided into two. There's those who do not care, who say, "I'm okay, I'm fine, I'm not leaking, I'm not sick, I'm not hungry, I'm educated, so I don't care." But then there's the other half who has a heart and who feels. And we don't all have to build hospitals. I wish you would. But then there are so many other things that one can do. Help to educate a child. Help an old person. Help a diabetic who needs insulin every day. Find out something that you can do. Take an example. For instance, it costs about $10 a month to pay the school fees for a child. That's less than 50 cents a day. Give those 50 cents to a child who would use that to go to school and maybe become a future doctor. My doctors, the two ladies that thank goodness are working in the hospital while I'm sitting here, were born in a situation of war. They went to school in refugee camps. They taught themselves to read under the shade of trees in schools that had no benches, that had no electricity. And because somebody gave them that chance to go to school, and then they started nursing and midwifery, and then I sponsored them through medical school, they are today female doctors who are performing surgery, who are doing C-sections, who are saving lives. So even with 50 cents, you can do a lot. Find a school. I mean, Jazeera is being watched by everybody around the world. It's not only for the Somalis, but anywhere in the world, there's somebody who needs help, and just decide to help. Link up with other people who are doing wonderful work, learn from them.
On my laptop, I have part of your legacy, which are trained midwives.
Yes.
On my laptop. That is part of your legacy.
Yes.
People worry about what will happen when you're no longer around.
I am not around the hospital now, and it's running without me.
Right.
And of course, like every mother, you wonder, you say, well, what will
happen to your
happen when
kids?
I'm gone? What will
Yeah.
happen to my kids?
Yeah.
Of course I worry about it, but I prepare for it.
Right.
Like you leave a will in your family. What I want to leave, I want to leave behind a group of people who are dedicated, who are educated, and who are determined to carry that legacy forward with or without me. And
all right, you heard Somaliland. Edna has spoken, and I will leave. I love this picture. I love all the pictures on the gallery on your website, but this is Edna as a young woman in the UK training, and look what she turned out like. She did okay. Thank you very much to our Google Hangout, to Kay, to Muna, and Meskrem, to our online community as well. Have to wrap up the conversation. I'm so sorry about that, but I know you will be hearing much more about Edna and a hospital all over the world. Meanwhile, on the next show, does love reign supreme over race, religion and culture? We discuss some of the highs and lows of cross-cultural relationships. It is going to be a candid conversation. I don't think you should miss it. We will see you online as always. Take care.